Before we jump in, let me show you how to interact with the contract. We will learn how to deploy the contract in our virtual environment, how to read from the state, how to write to the state, so we have solid understanding. Let's start by creating a new file. Let's call it contract interaction.sol. And inside here we specify some pragma. We create a contract. Let's give it a name called my contract. And inside we create some state variable. Let's say uint256 number, or let's call it my number. In constructor we can initially set it to some value, or we don't have to, but let's set it to some value. Let's say 5, so initially it will be 5. Let's just deploy this very simple contract. So what we have to do, we have to go to Solidity compiler, make sure our compiler version matches the pragma which we specified here, also that our language is Solidity. We can also check autocompile, so it will automatically compile and show errors, and then we hit the compile. In case the contract was automatically compiled, you can see the green check mark. After that, we had to deploy and run transactions. Again, if you don't see these are plugins which are installing through the plugin manager, so you can just search for deploy and run transactions and Solidity compiler. So let's head here, and here we can choose from 3 different environments. Currently we'll use the JavaScript virtual machine, which means it will run inside there. Usually make sure that this is set like this. You can also change it to injected Web3 or Web3 provider, meaning if you have some local running blockchain or you're using MetaMask, you can connect to it, but I will talk about it later. Now we don't need to know about it. Then you can choose account. You have some accounts already with Ether. Then you can see what contract, and then you hit the deploy button. After contract has been deployed, you see the check mark and you see your contract here. When you click this little arrow, it expands and you can see whatever functions you have defined. Currently we don't have any, that's why we don't see. So let's define function which sets this number to new value. So let's write function set number, which will take a value of uint256 because it needs to be the same, called num. And very important, the visibility, which will be, we set it public, and this changes the number to whatever we pass. So now we have to redeploy this contract, because contract can be deployed only once. So if we made changes and wanted to test it, we have to redeploy. But when you redeploy, you will see another contract is created, so you have to interact with the new one. So when I click here, you can see I already have a function, so we can delete the old one so it's not confusing us. Now this function is called setNumber, do exactly one written here, and now it expects uint256, a number which we can say 10, and we set the number, and the transaction was executed successfully. And as you notice, now we don't have 100 Ethereum, but it cost us some very small amount. Writing to state cost us the gas, or basically a very small amount of Ethereum. Now if we want to see what the value of my number is, we have 2 options. We can create a function which will get us the value, so let's do that. Again, you need to specify the visibility, which is public, returns uint, and then we return the my number. As we can see, it's also suggesting that because we are not changing the state, we can just set this to view. So we redeploy, go to the new one, and we can see we also have the get number. So if we get the number, we can see that the value is 5. That's the one initially set. Now we change it to 10, we set, then we get again, and now we see it's 10. So the state was changed. This is one option how to get it. So you can set the function. If you don't want, you can also, if you have just simple variable, you can also set this to public. We redeploy, and now we see we still have access to this variable now, but now it's called my number because we are making this public. So when we get it, you can see it's 5, and when we set it to 15, you can get it again, so it's 15. So if you have a simple value, you can just make it public if you want to expose it to outside. But if you have object from which you only want to make certain properties public, then I suggest to create a function and only return those properties from the object which you want to return. Let me show you if I make a function which sets number, but I make it internal or private, redeploy the contract. Let me just delete the old ones. Then you can see the set number is not longer visible. If I make it external though, redeploy, then you can see set number is visible again. So public and external are visible. So just to summarize, when you want to interact with the contract in Solidity, make sure you compile it first. After it has been compiled, you can go to deploy and run transactions. make sure the JavaScript VM is selected, as this is just simulated environment where you can do stuff. Select an account and then just deploy. And then you are interacting with the blockchain, which is simulated, and you can execute the transactions, write and read to the state, and basically you will test the contract in this environment. After you are sure that the contract works as expected, you can move to the next step, which is testing it with your front end to make sure it communicates properly.